Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Coach Timmy and today I'm going to be going over MrSavage's solo Cash Cup games from this weekend where he came 61st place, 2 points off the money, and we're going to work out why he was on the brink. Now let's set the stage. So MrSavage is one of the best solo players in the world, and that's because of his IQ and his decision making at really important moments in the game. We're going to be taking a look at the one really poor game he had on the weekend. It was a 1 kill 20th, essentially only a 10-point game for probably around 25-26 minutes worth of queues and playtime. A real tournament killer, and if he gets 2 more points here, he makes money. And he had the setup to make well more than 10 points from this game. So we're going to take our time, go over each decision that he makes throughout early, mid, and late, why it's good, why it's bad, and go from there. So to quickly discuss his early game, there's nothing really extravagant he does. He lands over at John Wick. He gets upgrade there. He can get his spaz from any makeshift he has. He's got enough parts around him to make a purple pump. And then he goes over to the slurp truck and he uses that for a shield. This is great for him because it means that he doesn't have to use any shield that he finds. Everything he finds is extra for him. He then also goes and takes a fight with the bot down at Sweaty. This means that he's guaranteed a purple pump and a scar at every game, which is just ridiculous for any solo cup. So when he sets himself up like this, I think it's really important that he puts himself into a really good spot in terms of his rotations. So let's work out how he makes those rotations and whether or not there's any mistakes we can pick in them. I have to be honest, I couldn't find many mistakes with his rotations whatsoever. You'll see first zone, he pulls himself all the way to dead side up near Craggy. He finds himself a building to waste some time in. I've talked about the concept of time wasting before. Essentially, it's just putting yourself into an area or a spot where you're sitting there to waste time. You're waiting for the next zone to pop. You're taking yourself out of the rotation pool so that you don't waste mats or damage just standing out in the open or making unnecessary movements when you don't need to. So he wastes time here, and essentially by doing this, he's guaranteeing himself the next rotation with the mats that he currently has, and then he's also guaranteeing that any of the shield he has is not going to be wasted. He makes a really good call by going deep into first, and what I mean by that is he didn't go central, he actually went far into dead side, and by doing this, if you get the worst case scenario that it pulls towards you, you already have that rotation free. You're not sitting central and having to rotate with other people. If you have to go through dead side, that's fine, that's an easy rotation to make. He pulls second zone, which makes things super easy for him. He sits and waits for third, gets perfect center third, and then also gets perfect center fourth. So what I'm worried about here is that we've seen him have a really good first zone rotation, pull second, then basically pull third and fourth right on his head. What went wrong here? How come he gets a perfect mid-game, sets himself up beautifully, but can't capitalize? Let's look over his late game and see if there's any issues we can pick apart. Now, late game, I actually think he plays basically to perfection up until second moving. Now, I'm going to discuss first moving because I think it's worth talking about. First moving is perfect. He does it really nicely. One thing that I really like about watching MrSavage is he's incredibly mobile between layers. What I mean by that is he's not afraid to go up, to go down, to change layers, to make him a more difficult target for other people who need refreshes. I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with. They're worried about playing along one plane. They don't think about changing layers very often. This is something that MrSavage is the opposite in struggling with. He moves so often between layers. If you're trying to get a refresh on him, it's going to be incredibly difficult to track and then follow him without getting third-partied along the way. It's really nice play to watch. Hopefully that's something that you can take away from this, is that layer mobility, particularly in solos, is something that's extremely important in a no movement meta. You don't want to get caught up in between layers. You want to make sure you're always mobile between layers so that you can be establishing your own tarp. What you want to try and avoid is getting caught up in amongst other stuff. If you're going to be the first to establish into an area, you're always going to be able to stay ahead. So that's something that he does really nicely. As soon as he falls behind, say he gets a refresh and he falls, 3, 4, 5 tiles behind zone, the first thing he's thinking is, how can I get up and out of the scenario and start establishing my own layer? You'll see here he cuts right and then cuts up so that he can start moving in his own way. Then when he sees it pulls off the hill, he drops again. Lots of layer mobility, and I think that's one of the really awesome things that I learned watching him. That's actually a real positive for anyone who's trying to survive going into solos, and then also it helps you save mats. If you're going up and down a lot, you tend to not protect your head, protect your sides as much, but it's generally only for 1 or 2 layers, which means you can rely on not taking a huge amount of damage, but also make that movement towards zone. Now, another thing he does in first moving is he balances the idea of hunting for his refresh, hunting for his kill, and then also making that rotation. So like I said, he cuts right and then cuts up when he needs to, But what he also does is gets the refresh when he needs to. He jumps in, he finds his kill really easily, and then gets back ahead. He prioritizes and balances those two things really, really nicely in first moving. Now, let's talk about what happens in second moving. This is when I think I've seen the only time I don't like a play that Savage has made. Here, he gets too greedy and too hungry for the kill. He has 820 mats as second moving pops and requires him to move basically max distance. He has a free rotation to his right, and instead of immediately making that movement, he chooses to try and focus down a guy who he knows is weak. Now, I understand wanting that kill, but I also think for someone who is as intelligent as Savage's, he'll look back on this and go, I should have just made that rotation. I didn't need to look for that kill. This comes back to the idea of knowing your priorities late game, and especially in solos, it's important to have that checklist mentally guided in your head. What's my first priority? What's my second priority? Going from there. First priority should always be to stay ahead, particularly if you have mats. Obviously, priorities change as your mats change. As you go down, the priority becomes the refresh. But when you have 820 mats and you've got a max zone rotation, but you have the ability to play dead side like he did, playing to the right, getting back ahead, and then looking for the refresh was the play. That will be why he's on the Brink this week, guys. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you let me know in the comments. Tell me who else you want me to do, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.